Hello and welcome to the Byline podcast from the Byline Times. The Byline Times, it's what the papers don't say, what radio doesn't report and what telly doesn't tell you. This time, what will happen if Donald Trump becomes president again? What will it mean for the UK and NATO? How will ordinary Americans fare? Here's my conversation with Jay Rosen. Jay is a professor of media at New York University, and this was recorded at the Byline Festival at Dartington College. Professor Rosen talks me through the complicity of the media in Trump's success and introduces the concept of freedom from fact. First, though, how likely does he think a second Trump presidency is?
He's the favorite. He has to be considered the favorite, and so it's extremely likely. It's dangerously likely. And he has momentum, and right now with the spectacular events with Joe Biden of the last couple of weeks, the situation is even worse. So we're at a very serious and very potentially deadly situation for American democracy.
You're putting it in almost apocalyptic terms. How so?
Well, that's because there's never been a candidate like him. And some of the things that he is saying he will do and he's quite capable of doing are going to undo a democratic society, or could. And many of the barriers that would prevent that kind of thing have been run over, the most important of which is Supreme Court. Would ordinarily be the agent that puts a halt or a limit on how bad it could get. But now we have a Supreme Court, because of the Republican Party's nominations to it, that doesn't function like that anymore. In fact, it is very clearly enabling Trump to get through this campaign without facing trial for all of the things that he is facing trial from. So it's a unique moment and very dangerous. And another thing you have to remember is a huge portion of American homes include guns. So if you think about things getting out of hand in a country with more guns than anybody, there's that in the background. It's probably going to be a close election. So a close election also gets people's blood going. There's just a lot of reasons to have a sense of foreboding.
There is Project 2025. So this is seen as being Trump's manifesto if he wins election again. How does that differ from what Trump has said previously? And why would progressives like you be wary of it?
Well, first time he ran, he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't expect to win. He didn't know who should be part of government because he hadn't spent any time thinking about government. He was completely unqualified for the position and lazy about learning. Now he has a much better sense of what he wants to accomplish, especially what he wants to tear down and destroy. And he is no longer going to resort to a habit he called central casting, where you just take people who look the part and you don't care what they think or what the relationship is between your agenda and their agenda. That's kind of gone to the background now. And the Republican Party has made peace with being the party of Donald Trump. And so the two operations are working together in a way that they weren't in his first election. And many of the things that the 2025 agenda describe are just radical destruction of the way things are done in a country. But also, I think another really important part about that document is the communication system, the media system has changed in ways that almost everybody doesn't really recognize day to day. And this is one of them, where it used to be when you had controversial plans for what to do if you're elected, you kept them secret until the moment you spring them on unaware people, right? And now what Trump and people who are learning from Trump do is they parade their most extreme ideas and demands in public to create a kind of chaos or an environment of threat. And they hope to frighten their opponents that way. but also turn off some people to listening to them. And they are out front with crazy sorts of extreme behavior, not trying to conceal it at all, but making it part of their political style, which is something that I think we need to understand better. Trump's political style is not to cover up and keep things secret. It's to parade his worst ideas and shock. So this shock treatment is enabled in some ways by the fact that the media system doesn't really have a coherent public at the receiving end of it. The fragmentation of the media world is part of what makes Trump's political style work.
And I've heard you talking on a panel about the way in which the big newspapers in New York and Washington will be created by and read by progressives, read by Democrats. So even if they attempt to hold Trump and other candidates to account, the people who might benefit from reading that hold to account are elsewhere.
That's right. There's no place where the New York Times and the Washington Post meet the typical MAGA voter. It doesn't happen. And Trump has been successful in his description of the mainstream media as the enemy of the people and his repeat ritual of pointing them out and literally pointing his finger at them to the point where it's gone way beyond something that I used to study, charges of media bias from so-called conservatives against what they considered to be the liberal media. That was like 20 years ago. Now things have evolved far beyond that, where Trump's fans assume that if a fact or a claim or a charge was reported on in the elite newspapers, that meant it was by definition made up, not true. And so this is part of a larger thing that I described as freedom from fact. I'm going to say it again. Freedom from fact. That is an essential component of Trump's political style and of the bond that he has with his most ardent supporters. And when people are kind of high on freedom from fact, meaning they don't have to show evidence, they don't care about documentation, they don't care if things are true in the old-fashioned sense of truth, like evidence and certain fidelity to fact that was said to be important for serious, powerful people. I can remember easily from a couple of presidents ago how insistent White House staffs were if their candidate or the president made a factual error. That was something that was extremely important. You had to correct it the next day, or it would kind of fester and the media would keep reporting on it. And it was a serious problem if the president was wrong about something. We are so far beyond that now with the proven effectiveness of freedom from fact that this is, I think, going to be one of the big, quote unquote, innovations that Trump brings to politics, not just in the U.S., but around the globe for these Trump wannabes to exist, and those who are kind of ahead of Trump in this political style, like in Hungary.
Viktor Orban, yeah. And I think people will recognise those trends here in the United Kingdom as well, notwithstanding that we have recently elected a new Labour government. But freedom from fact fascinates me. Is this something that Trump has set out to create? Is it something rather that he has sought to exploit, having witnessed the changes in the media that have emerged, particularly since the rise of social media and new forms of technology?
It began in a much more prosaic way. It was his own personal style. The way that he could make the defects in his personality work for him was just to deny everything, lie constantly, claim whatever he needed to claim to get out of a situation, create problems for himself by lying and just add more lies to it to try and solve it. This was the way he operated as a business person before he stepped onto the political stage. And he certainly doesn't have any coherent theory behind it. Freedom from fact is my term. It's not something that he would ever describe as his modus operandi. But we began to see this very early in his political rise, something else that I call verification in reverse, which is part of freedom from fact, was a part of his landing on the political stage. When he took the lead in questioning Obama's birth certificate, which was a way of saying that he's not really American, right? Which is a way of turning him into an alien. He was attacking a fact where Barack Obama was born in hopes of undoing it. And the way that works is by attacking a very basic requirement of journalism, which is verification. Verification is like the heart of being a journalist. Did that really happen? Let's verify it. What does the evidence show? What did the documents show? Let's interview the person who was there. Proof, evidence, these kinds of things are the basic building material that you need to verify a claim. And that's key to how journalism works. Verification in reverse is when you take something that's already been proven, verified, and you introduce doubt about it, because when you introduce doubt about something like that, it creates commotion and reaction and argument and energy, and people who are hoping that Obama's birth certificate is fake are energized by that. And so freedom from fact involves other rituals like taking something that's been nailed down and introducing doubt about it. And the interesting thing about that little trick is that the more nailed down the fact claim is, the better for freedom from fact, right? Because if the really big facts are all lies, like is the president an American citizen? That's a pretty serious claim, right? If the really big things are lies, then you can assume that all the little things are lies too. And so that's what I call verification in reverse.
It's quite astonishing, really, that Trump has managed to survive all of this. I know that
Yes.
the closest politician to Trump in the UK was arguably Boris Johnson, who was ultimately brought down by his lies, notwithstanding a lot of cheerleading on his behalf by parts of the mainstream media. Is Trump not subject to that same challenge in the United States? Or is there what sounds to me like quite an appalling idea, quite a frightening idea, a kind of willful ignorance on the part of his supporters to say that it's all just lies, even if there's something over here which says that something he has said can be proven to be untrue? Nah, you just can't trust them. It's kind of messing with people's reality.
Yeah, it's totally messing with people's realities for sure. But we also have to keep in our minds the effect that sheer chaos has on these claims and counterclaims. Steve Bannon said something really interesting. It's been quoted many times. But
this is his former press advisor, Steve Bannon, now in jail.
Now in jail, big supporter of Trump, in a way kind of like the ideological brains of the operation in a way.
The guy who ran Breitbart, the right-wing alt-right news website, for example.
Yeah. So in 2018, he said something really important, which is the Democrats don't matter. The real opposition is the media, and the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with shit. And this idea is just a different kind of propaganda, not necessarily new, but it's a propaganda where you don't care about the argument. You're not trying to get a false claim across. You're not really trying to influence people's beliefs. You overwhelm them with too much information, too many claims, too much argument, so that they either get confused by the back and forth or they get disgusted by the media environment.
They check out.
Or they just determine with their intelligence that it'll just be too expensive to find out what's right here, so I'm going to not pay attention at all because it's all probably false anyway. So that idea of flooding the zone allows you to put in the zone things that are true, maybe half true, a lot of things that are false, things that you don't even care about. And you do it openly in order to not change people's minds, but drive them from the public square. And he has been very successful at doing that. And it's extremely difficult to know, how do you counter that strategy? By introducing the facts? Well, let me show you the facts, right? Well, that just goes into the machine, right? And actually allows for this method to work.
How does that, though, translate in the case of some people anyway, into support for Trump? Because I understand that people are driven from the public square, there's too much confusion and chaos, and people are inclined at that point to zone out. I don't need all of this in my life.
It justifies their wish to get rid of the mainstream media.
Underlying this, I think, is something quite dark, isn't it? Because it's almost as though there is a percentage of people within the United States who want to think ill of their fellow citizens, who want to feel superior to other, and I use that word advisedly, people who are othered within their society. They can't do that within the respectable, conventional frameworks of the mainstream media. This gives them a new framework by which their darkest impulses can be justified and not seen as somehow primitive or evil. I may be over-egging it here, I don't know, but what you're describing does sound to me like a very dark phenomenon.
I think that's a good description. In a way, it's approaching truth from the demand side, if you see what I mean. There's a lot of people out there who wanted it to be true that Obama was not an American citizen.
Because, let's say it bluntly, they're racist and they feel that white people are superior to black people.
For any number of reasons, including those. They want it to be true. And that is the chord that Trump is striking. You want it to be true? You can have that. You can have that. And if you can have it even when it isn't true, all the more exciting. So this is what's happening. It's part of the glue that keeps the Trump coalition or the really extreme MAGA movement going. It's spreading in the sense that the Republican Party as a whole now kind of has to recognize this. I don't know if you remember this, but during Trump's last campaign, the one he lost, the Republican Party didn't even bother making an agenda. They didn't go into the election with an agenda. The agenda was Trump.
So no manifesto as such.
No manifesto, no priority list, just Trump.
They have got this Project 2025, though, on this occasion, haven't they?
Yeah.
And one part of that is about addressing what they describe as the deep state, isn't it? People we might describe as experts, civil servants, people with knowledge and with a track record of delivery. And this is why the next Trump administration, if it comes to pass, is feared more perhaps even than the first, that it is that much more radical.
Yes. Another way to think about this is every knowledge profession has to be under attack in this approach. What I mean by knowledge profession is just people who are supposed to figure out what's actually going on. And there's different kinds of people in politics and government who have that goal. Journalists, of course, are well known, but there's lots of other people, all the people in the intelligence communities, all the experts who are supposed to figure out what the options are for the president to do. Diplomats have this responsibility, experts.
Medical staff in a time of COVID,
Yeah.
for example. We had a similar thing
exactly.
about attacks on experts during Brexit.
All of the experts during the pandemic, right? And everybody who is supposed to have the knowledge necessary to solve problems is under attack in the Trump political style. And you can see how that creates a lot of room for maneuvering if you can actually live in a world where you've accomplished freedom from fact.
There's something a little bit Pol Pot about it. I'm not suggesting that he plans to kill all these civil servants, but the idea then that you'd get rid of the deep state under Project 2025 by making tens of thousands of state officials redundant. People we would call civil servants in this country.
Yes.
And just say, all that expertise, all that knowledge, put it on the bonfire.
Yeah, it's positivist or it's categorical, right? Everything that the intelligence community does is pointed against me. So we have to destroy every part of it, right? that kind of thinking, it's not rhetoric. This is what I was trying to say at the beginning. It's a plan. It's not distant in any way. This is the kind of thing that 3 weeks after the inauguration of a Trump presidency could be totally up and running. And so that's why I say it's so serious. We are extremely close to losing entire institutions. Another way to think about this would be people in the Republican Party realized that they couldn't get things they have long wanted through the normal up and downs of politics. And so they've decided to take a different route, which is to destroy the institutions until they can't provide any resistance.
And those things might involve protection for workers' rights, for example, might involve environmental protection.
Good example. Public health, all kinds of restraints on executive power also. And we're very close to those kinds of things happening, but it's hard to communicate that in an environment of chaos.
In terms of Trump's foreign policy, here in the UK, we regard him as being friendly towards Putin, somebody who would, he said he's admired Putin, hasn't he, in the past? And just trying to think through what that would mean for Ukraine, what allowing Russia to succeed in Ukraine would mean for the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
What it would mean for NATO, which offers the UK protection.
Yes, but there's very few actual policies in Donald Trump's notion of the presidency. But there's a couple. One is closeness to Putin, as you said, reduce conflict with Putin. Another is trade, reorganizing world trade to the benefit of American workers, at least that's how he puts it. And his suspicion of NATO. That's another thing. NATO could be gone inside a month. Gone. It's not a abstraction. It's not a proposal. It's like a fact that we could easily withdraw from it and send it crashing so that the Europeans have to decide on what are they going to do themselves. We're very close to that happening. So is he likely to win? It's a serious and dark question.
Jay, you've scared us in this conversation, and one of the purposes of these conversations is to look forward, hopefully, with a little bit of optimism. Can you give us anything positive to take away from this?
Well, I think if there's anything positive, it's going to be in the form of some sort of a lesson that democracy is fragile and you can lose the institutions of democracy very quickly. It's sort of like New York City. If you spend any time in New York City only works because everybody kind of tries to make it work. But one tunnel goes out and the whole system doesn't work anymore. And democracy's like that a little bit. Supreme Court doesn't work anymore. Well, it's hard for the machinery of democracy to protect us, right? So if there's going to be something good, it would be that you can lose it really easily. And when it's under threat, which it is now, you have to recognize that and change what you're doing, which is the message that I tried to give the journalists of America, is you can't go on like this is normal political combat, one party against another. It's a different situation. And it's been difficult to persuade them of that, even though they know that this election is unlike any other election.
Professor Jay Rosen from New York University. And you can watch that interview and others, including my interviews with the likes of Bonnie Greer, Sangeeta Maiska, Lord Victor Adebowale, and others at Byline TV on YouTube. This has been a Byline audio production produced by me, Adrian Goldberg, and Phil Driscoll. And don't forget to head over to bylineaudio.com, where you can listen to more podcasts such as Adventures in Americana with the aforementioned Bonnie Greer and the Byline Times editor Hardeep Matharu, plus the myth-busting and very funny Utter Bollocks featuring Otto English and John Mitchinson. These are free to stream, but you can enjoy bonus content and an ad ad-free version of this podcast by signing up for a small fee to our premium service. Thanks very much indeed for listening. We'll see you again soon. Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Byline Audio.